What if some of the artifacts of our past aren't just relics of human history, but evidence of life beyond our planet? Today we look at some of the strangest ancient objects ever found. These are real artifacts from ancient civilizations that could be alien in origin. The Thule papyrus is a mysterious artifact that some believe could document an ancient encounter with extraterrestrial beings. The story begins in 1933 when Alberto Thule, a curator at the Vatican Museums, discovered a roll of papyrus in Cairo. This document supposedly dates back to the reign of Thutmose III, around 1480 BCE. After Thule's death, the scroll suspiciously vanished. Years later, Italian Egyptologist Boris de Rachowiltz claimed to have found a transcription of the Thule papyrus, and according to his translation, the text describes a bizarre event. On a winter day, a disc appeared in the sky, approximately 164 feet long and 16.5 feet wide. The disc reportedly emitted a foul odor and had no visible head. As it approached, people were so shocked that they hit themselves in confusion. Then more discs appeared, shining brighter than the sun, followed by fish raining down from the sky. Pharaoh ordered incense offering to calm the Egyptian god of Amun-Ra and mandated that the occurrence be recorded for posterity. The Ica stones, which come from the Ica province in Peru, are made up of a type of volcanic rock. They vary widely in size. There's small palm-sized pieces to massive boulders over 1.5 feet across. What's interesting about these stones is what's carved on them. They seem to depict an unknown ancient civilization with astonishingly advanced technology. The figures are shown in scenes with all this complex technology and medical practices. Some stones depict surgeries like heart and brain operations, C-sections, organ transplants. There's also images that suggest knowledge of astronomy, with figures looking at the stars through telescopes, and carvings of flying machines and spaceships, or at least what looks a lot like them. So how could a civilization capable of such advanced technology have existed so long ago, and how is there no physical evidence of them outside of the images carved on these stones? No ruins, no artifacts, no remains have surfaced to support the existence of this society. So are these genuine relics of a long-lost civilization, or are they just hoaxes? The Drapa stones are a series of mysterious artifacts that some claim are around 12,000 years old. These granite discs are said to feature inscribed markings that tell the story of an extraterrestrial crash landing on Earth. According to the legend, in 1937 an archaeological expedition in the Bayanhar Mountains in China, led by researcher Chi Pute, discovered 716 of these discs, along with the remains of beings with thin bodies and large heads. The story goes that after years of study at the Academy of Prehistory in Beijing, Chinese archaeologists managed to translate the markings. They said that the discs were created by extraterrestrial beings following a crash. Their research was published in an academic journal by one of the archaeologists named Su Nui, but the findings were highly criticized, and Nui was met with so much ridicule that he eventually just left the country, starting a new life in Japan, where he died shortly after. The Drapa stones are said to measure about 1 foot in diameter and feature 2 grooves that form a double spiral around a central hole. The hieroglyph-like symbols are claimed to be visible only with a magnifying glass. Now, for a long time they were forgotten, but in 1966 the story of the stones resurfaced when a Soviet journalist with a name I cannot pronounce published an article claiming that the discs contained metals like cobalt and acted as electrical conductors, even producing a humming sound when placed on a special turntable. Till this day, though, we don't know where the stones are or if they really did exist. The Wandjina are figures in Aboriginal Australian culture known as cloud and rain spirits. You can find their rock art in the Kimberley region of Western Australia, with some paintings dating back around 4,000 years. According to local legends, the Wandjina came to Earth to create, teach, and guide the Aboriginal people. Eventually they disappeared, with stories saying some went underground while others returned to the sky, appearing as moving lights at night. What's really interesting is how the Wandjina are depicted in the artwork. They're drawn with big eyes and light skin, which looks very similar to the classic gray alien images many describe in modern UFO encounters. So it makes you wonder, were these ancient spirits inspired by actual alien encounters? Ling Qi, usually translated to death by 1,000 cuts, was a form of execution in China dating back to the 10th century, and aside from how grim this was, it also held a much deeper meaning. If you were sentenced to die this way, it meant you'd messed up in the worst way. Ling Qi was reserved for crimes like treason, matricide, and patricide, or mass killing. The condemned would be tied to a wooden frame of some kind, usually in public, and then it's pretty much exactly what you'd imagine. They'd be cut over and over again until they eventually died. Sometimes the process would be drawn out, sometimes it would be a bit quicker. There aren't a lot of detailed historical records on the exact ways in which this would be practiced, so it would have varied quite a bit, depending on the crime and who was in charge. Not only would this have been a horrific way to go, it was also seen as incredibly humiliating, and on top of that, it was believed that those who died this way would suffer in the afterlife as well, with their bodies not being whole after death.
You think that's bad? Listen to this, because next on our list we have something called the BLOOD Eagle, a ritualistic form of execution performed by ancient Vikings throughout the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th century. Rough time to be a Viking enemy. I'm warning you now, it's about to get graphic. The BLOOD Eagle consisted of a person sitting upright and then having the skin on their back cut down the middle and peeled to either side, and then having their ribs severed from their spinal cord in the back with some kind of ancient blade that probably wasn't sharp enough to do the job very quickly, meaning the process most likely took hours. Once severed from the spine, the ribs would then be broken to be positioned outwards like wings coming out of the back of the body. The back skin on either side was then attached to hooks, the hooks to ropes, and the ropes to 2 large wooden poles on either side of the person so that the Vikings could properly and gruesomely display their sick, eagle-inspired abomination.
The Celts were often described as barbarians by the Romans. They were said to often rush into battle totally nude, they practiced strange rituals, and they had a real love of heads. Now, history is often written by the victor, so the Celts being these wild barbaric tribes may have been overstated, but there was some truth to what was written about them. Like the head thing, for example. Collecting heads as trophies is something a number of ancient civilizations practiced throughout time, but the Celts took things to a different level. They believed the soul was housed in the noggin and liked using the human heads they lopped off in battle as decorative pieces. They'd hang them off their horses, they'd nail them to the walls, and decorate the fronts of their homes with them. Kind of like demented versions of Halloween decorations, only they weren't trying to be spooky. It was kind of like them putting their medals and trophies in their front lawns.
Next up we have the Mayans. Just as a whole, those guys were super twisted. Honestly, it's hard to even know where to start. As a society, the Mayans were super big on torment and sacrifice, often removing the heads or hearts of their enemies in drawn out ways that many times began with beatings, burnings, and scalpings in order to appease the gods. These sacrifices were often made when new buildings or leaders rose within the civilization, and they were great architects, so that happened a lot. Another pretty gruesome thing they did is they played their own version of soccer mixed with basketball, except it wasn't that much like soccer or basketball because the team that lost had their heads cut off and used as the ball in the next round. Speaking of heads, they liked theirs flat and long, so they often used wooden boards strapped to the heads of young men and women to elongate their heads, and they also filed their teeth into points. I am sure there's more, but let's leave it there for now.
Gladiators were held in pretty high regard in ancient Rome. Sure, many of them were slaves and criminals, but not all. They were all seen as strong, virile warriors though, and that meant there had to be some special power running through their veins. So when a gladiator died, it wasn't uncommon for parts of their bodies to be used to cure different ailments. Epilepsy was a big one. It was believed that consuming the red stuff from a fallen gladiator would give the epileptic epileptic person some of the strength the gladiator had in life. Gladiators' livers were also believed to be a powerful medicine, and even when it came to cosmetics, parts of gladiators were used. Their dead skin would be scraped up from bathtubs and used in face creams, which for some reason grosses me out the most. Imagine finding out that UFC fighters' dead skin was used in your bottle of facial moisturizer.
Next up, while not as gruesome as the rest, I have a feeling talking about bed bugs is gonna make it pretty hard to sleep tonight. I get it if you're mad at me, but just remember, I'm doing it to myself too. Bed bugs were rampant in ancient times, and there really wasn't any way to get rid of them, meaning that ancient civilizations just had to deal with the infestations, the bites, and the itching, which of course often led to infection. The oldest bedbug specimen found in Egypt was 3,500 years old, and it was discovered in 1999. But recently, at the Mile Point Cave site in Oregon, researchers discovered an even older member of the bedbug genus that lived over 11,000 years ago and would have likely fed on hunter-gatherer civilizations who seasonally frequented the caves. Yeah, count me out of this whole thing.
How did a samurai test the quality of his katana back in the day? Traditionally, they would duel other samurai in what was known as sujigiri. Sometimes they'd practice with their new blade on criminals and corpses as well. But there was one other way to test the quality of a new katana or fighting style. Just attack a random passerby in the street. In the Sengoku period, the word sujigiri took on a whole new meaning, referring to samurai often testing their blades on innocent people out in the street. They would need to know their blade could cut through a person effectively before taking it into battle. So if there weren't any other options, what better way to test a sword than by doing just that? Usually the victims would be commoners wandering the roads alone at night. Sujigiri started becoming a real problem in the Sengoku period. The samurai just had too much power and seemed to kill indiscriminately. By 1602 though, the practice was outlawed, with offenders being sentenced to death. But that didn't mean it just stopped immediately. In the early years of the Edo period, innocent people were still being sliced up in the street.
Here's something gross about the ancient Egyptians. Not only did ancient Egyptian men love the company of beautiful women, some of them really didn't care whether or not the woman was alive or dead. And so, as was typical in ancient Egypt, when a man died, he was embalmed right away, but when a beautiful woman died, she was actually left to decay for 3 or 4 days in order to make her less desirable to embalmers tasked with working on the preservation of her body. While this might seem a bit extra, it was actually super necessary, because it's not just something ancient Egyptians woke up one day and decided on. It was their solution to a very real problem that became apparent to the rulers of the civilizations after one too many embalmers had gotten caught in the act.
Speaking of ancient Egyptians, there was another practice that was pretty disturbing by today's standards. It wasn't uncommon for servants to be buried alongside their deceased masters, especially those of high rank, like pharaohs. This practice was seen as an honor, not a punishment. Egyptians believed strongly in an afterlife where they would continue their existence, and it was important to make sure there was a smooth transition. Being buried with their master meant the servant could continue serving them in the afterlife. Yeah, imagine you had to go into work one day and you found out your boss had just died. Then you're told you have to join them in their burial just because you work for them. Might sound strange to us today, at least I hope it does. Where are you working if that doesn't sound strange? But back then, it was seen as a sign of respect and devotion.
And finally, let's talk hygiene. While when you think of ancient civilizations, your mind generally does not jump to self-care and cleanliness, rituals of cleaning and freshening up did exist back then, although they may as well not have. For this last point, I'm going to be specifically talking about ancient Roman hygiene, which for starters consisted of toothpaste fashioned out of powdered rat brains and using one's own urine as mouthwash. I love history movies, especially ones like Alexander the Great, but it's times like this that I'm super glad they haven't created some kind of 4D viewing experience that allows you to follow the movies with all 5 senses, especially smell. Oh, and remember a few years ago when toilet paper went flying off the shelves and people who didn't get to it in time started seriously freaking out? Well, the Romans wouldn't have minded because their toilet paper was actually just a sponge tied to a stick that they shared. Oh, and due to methane buildup caused by a lack of irrigation in ancient times, their toilets often exploded. Oh, and their band-aids were made of cobwebs.
Dagu statues are these little figures from Japan's Jomon period, dating back to around 14,000 to 400 BCE. The humanoid and animal statues have these exaggerated features, especially when it comes to their big eyes and tiny mouths. Yes, very alien-like. Some researchers think these statues were used in rituals or as talismans, maybe even a way to ward off negative spirits or energy. Others think they may be these ancient people's depictions of creatures they actually encountered, beings that may have visited from above. Thanks to Eric von Daniken's book Chariots of the Gods, which posits that ancient cultures had contact with aliens, the Dagu have become pretty well known in the world of ancient alien conspiracy theories. A lot of these statues do kinda look like depictions of ancient astronauts clad in spacesuits, and who wouldn't want to believe that our ancestors encountered alien beings? It's just a cool idea. In July of 2014, something really interesting happened in Chhattisgarh, India. The State Department of Archaeology and Culture got in touch with the Indian Space Research Organization to look into some ancient rock paintings found in caves near Charama. The paintings are thought to be around 10,000 years old, and archaeologist J.R. Bhagat was especially fascinated with them. He believes that these paintings might show that ancient humans may have been looking to the stars and wondering about life beyond our planet. Some of the paintings depict large humanoid figures coming down from the sky, and a few of them look like they're wearing helmets or something resembling antenna. There's also a disc-shaped craft with 3 legs or maybe rays coming out from it. It's pretty hard to look at some of these pieces and not think of aliens. On top of that, there are legends of beings called the Rohela people, or the small-sized ones, who supposedly landed in round flying objects and took people from the village, never to be seen again. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the largest settlements in the Indus Valley civilization, built around 2600 BCE in what is now Pakistan. When excavations began in 1922, when the city was rediscovered, they found skeletons scattered across the streets, many seemingly frozen in time as if they died suddenly and unexpectedly. Bodies were found intertwined, holding hands, lying unburied in the street. The question was, and still is, what caused these people to die and why weren't they buried? On top of that, the skeletons were found to be radioactive, with levels comparable to those at Hiroshima. David Davenport, a British researcher who dedicated years to studying this site, believed that Mohenjo-Daro was annihilated by a blast similar to an atomic bomb. In his words, there was an epicenter about 50 yards wide where everything was crystallized, fused, or melted. Here's where it gets even stranger. Ancient texts like the Mahabharata describe a cataclysmic event. White hot smoke that was 1,000 times brighter than the sun reduced the city to ashes. According to Davenport, this destruction might have been tied to ancient conflicts involving aliens who could have had a hand in the fall of the city. The Vinca figurines are artifacts which were discovered in what is now Serbia, dating back around 5,500 years. They were created by the Vinca culture, known for having a pretty advanced society long before written history. And these small clay figures often depict animals and humans, or at least humanoids. Just look at these things. They're pretty strange looking. A lot of them have very unusual features. They almost look like reptilian creatures. So what are they supposed to be, and what were they used for? Well, we don't know for sure, but some believe they could represent deities or fertility symbols. Others think they may be representations of extraterrestrial beings. The Sabu disc is an ancient Egyptian artifact that dates back to around 3000 to 2800 BCE. Discovered in 1936, this disc was found in the tomb of an official named Sabu, hence the name. It's made of schist, a type of stone, and has a really unique design. For the time it was created, that is. Looking at the thing without context, you think it was just a broken off piece of wheel from some kind of machinery or something. Scrap metal. But that's exactly what makes this artifact seem so out of place. The thing looks like a steering wheel, but it's highly unlikely to be, so then what is it? Some people think it could have been some sort of ceremonial object, seeing as it was buried in Sabu's tomb. Others think it might have had some sort of practical purpose that we just don't understand. The disc's design just seems way ahead of its time. Could it be a tool that was part of a larger, advanced machine? Is it evidence of extraterrestrial technology, a gift from visitors from another world? Till this day, we still don't know. The Aiud object was discovered in Romania in 1974. It's this wedge-shaped metal piece that was discovered during construction work. First glance, it might seem pretty ordinary, but it isn't. Some have speculated that it could be of extraterrestrial origin, or just an origin we don't understand. And there are some compelling reasons for that. For one, there's the composition of the material. The wedge contains aluminum and silicon along with other metals, which is strange because aluminum wasn't really known or used until the 19th century. The thing is, the wedge of Aiud was found in sand alongside the bones of mastodons, suggesting it's much older than aluminum technology. And the patina coating the object indicated that it had been lying there for thousands of years, leading some to think it could date back to a time when ancient humans just didn't have the technology to create something like this. This has led to theories that it might have been part of an alien spacecraft, or some kind of other advanced device that they left behind. Could it be evidence of ancient aliens visiting Earth and interacting with our ancestors? Again, we just can't say for sure. Do you ever still have that small little voice in the back of your head warning you not to step out of bed late at night in case some ghoulish entity is waiting underneath to grab you by the ankles and drag you under? Tales of monsters dwelling in closets and under beds have been told since the dawn of time, across cultures all around the world. For Germans, the boogeyman is known as Bootsman. In some stories, he appears as a goblin. In others, he's a more formless, shadowy entity, but his purpose is always the same: stealing misbehaving youngsters. Parents would warn their young ones that if they didn't go to bed on time or got up in the middle of the night, they might get paid a visit from Bootsmen, who'd either crawl out from the closet or under their beds and whisk them away into the shadows, never to be seen again. Medieval-style parenting at its finest.
Ancient Mesopotamia is known for being the birthplace of writing and subsequently recorded history. Its people, the Sumerians, also built the world's first cities and developed the oldest known political and administrative systems. While these advancements did and still do set the civilization apart from many others, it does not mean that they were exempt from the presence of haunting legends designed to understand the world and, in some cases, scare the younger generations. One example of this is Gidom, or the death spirit. In ancient Mesopotamia, it was believed that when a person died, they could still appear to the living in the form of a Gidom, so long as their remains were being taken care of by the living on Earth. The belief shaped the way Sumerians and other Mesopotamian civilizations cared for their dead. In order to maintain a connection to the Gidom of the deceased, they would adorn burial sites with offerings and gifts, which would allow the Gidom version of their loved ones to thrive in the afterlife. Graves left barren resulted in Gidoms eating nothing but dust and becoming trapped in a sort of purgatory realm. The idea of mortality and life after death was as difficult then to comprehend as it is now, and so this ritual allowed the living to continue to care for their lost loved ones in the hopes of them one day appearing in the form of a Gidom, which could be called upon at any time with the use of a summoning ritual. Whether or not that ritual actually worked is an answer unfortunately lost to ancient history. Another legend stemming from the Sumerian civilization in Mesopotamia that supports the idea of Gidoms is the legend of Enkidu, mythological wartime comrade and friend of Gilgamesh and the former king of Uruk. In the legend, Enkidu is dead, living inside of a rather desolate afterlife where he is being held prisoner. Knowing the fate of his friend, Gilgamesh prays for the release of Enkidu from the realm, a request granted by the sun god who returns Enkidu to Earth. When Gilgamesh asks about the afterlife, Enkidu begins describing his dreary existence of being deceased, forced to survive off dirt, and not being able to participate in adult activities. Don't know why he added that, but apparently it was important. But he continued on to say that the conditions varied and that they were actually dependent upon the life a person lived prior to their death. Those who had 7 or more children were quite comfortable in the afterlife because of the fact that they had plenty of living relatives supplying their grave sites with food and drink. Those who had less children had less comfortable lives, but were still nowhere near as uncomfortable as the childless, who were condemned to starve and endure everlasting loneliness. Furthermore, Enkidu described the differences in conditions for people who were kind in life and respected the teachings of their elders, and those who were not. With those who were and did having quite comfortable afterlives, and those who weren't and did not eating nothing but dirt and existing in complete isolation. I wonder what kind of person Enkidu was to earn himself such a negative experience in his, albeit brief, afterlife.
The Nuklave is a creature from Scottish folklore, specifically from the Orkney Islands. This thing is about as terrifying and gnarly looking as it gets. So imagine this horse-like demon with no skin, all its muscles and veins are exposed, and not only that, but it has this human-like torso growing out of its back. The two things are just kind of fused together in this fleshy monstrosity. The creature is said to be very tall and has a horrible decaying face. It lives in the sea or marshlands and comes out to cause trouble and spread disease. In some stories, it's responsible for droughts or crop failures as well. And people believed that if the Nuklave was near, it meant something terrible was going to happen to the land or to the people living there. One of the more chilling parts of the legend is that the Nuklave can control the weather. If it's angry, it can bring storms and make the sea rough, which was especially frightening back in the day for people who relied so much on fishing.
In our number 10 spot, we have the Mayan calendar. The Mayans weren't just stargazers, they were timekeepers. Their complex calendar system, known as the Mayan long count, is one of the most precise in history. It tracked time over cycles, and while it famously predicted the end of the world in 2012, it may have been more about the cycles than finality. This calendar wasn't just a tool for marking days, it could have been a map to the future. Many believe the Mayans used this intricate understanding of time to predict not only celestial events, but societal shifts and even the rise and fall of civilizations. Could the Mayans have known more about the future than just the end of their calendar? Next, we are talking about the Antikythera mechanism. Discovered off the coast of Greece in 1901, the Antikythera mechanism looks like something out of a science fiction novel. This ancient device, often considered the world's first analog computer, was used to track astronomical positions and predict eclipses. But what if this wasn't just a tool for navigation or observation? Some theorists believe it could have been the first attempt at time travel technology, designed to predict not only the movements of the stars, but also to predict major events in history, possibly giving the ancients glimpses into future occurrences. Could this ancient Greek invention have had a deeper purpose, one that we still don't fully understand? Next, we are talking about the Oracle of Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi was more than just a spiritual guide. She was the voice of Apollo, believed to predict the future. Ancient Greeks flocked to Delphi, seeking answers to life's toughest questions, from the fate of nations to personal decisions. Her cryptic prophecies often seemed vague, but many historians believe she tapped into something more profound, perhaps a connection to future timelines. Some even suggest that the oracle's visions were not just inspired by the gods, but could have been glimpses of possible futures, offering a snapshot of what was to come. Was the oracle truly receiving divine messages, or was she unlocking the door to time itself? Next, we are talking about the Nazca lines. The Nazca lines, those enormous geoglyphs etched into the Peruvian desert, have long been a mystery. Some think they were made as offerings to the gods, while others believe they were designed to be seen by extraterrestrials. But what if these lines were actually time markers? Spread across miles of barren land, they form intricate patterns that align with the stars, suggesting that the ancients had a deep understanding of celestial events. Some researchers believe these patterns weren't just artistic, they may have been designed to mark significant moments in time, pointing to a hidden knowledge about future astronomical phenomena or events that would shape the world centuries later. Next, we are talking about the pyramids of Giza. The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned with the stars of Orion's belt with such precision that it could be a message from the ancients. This pyramid isn't just an impressive feat of architecture, it might be an ancient timekeeping device. The Egyptians were known for their astronomical knowledge, and the pyramid's alignment with the stars suggests that the pyramids could have been used as a tool to track time, marking specific moments in history and perhaps even predicting the future. Was this massive structure built not only to honor the pharaohs, but also as a cosmic clock to mark the passing of time, or could it have even been used to peer into future events?
Ancient Greece may not be the first place that comes to mind when thinking about alien contact, but their mythology, their advanced technology, it does make you wonder. The Greeks had gods and beings that descended from the sky, often in glowing chariots or surrounded by radiant light. You could interpret that as something of a UFO encounter. Take Prometheus, for example, who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. Could this be a metaphor for advanced knowledge gifted to early humans by an otherworldly being? Then there's more concrete stuff like the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient analog computer discovered in a shipwreck. This thing was capable of things that wouldn't be matched for over 1,000 years. Where did the Greeks get this level of understanding? Was it purely because they were just that smart, or is it possible they had some divine inspiration, maybe from beings beyond Earth? Here's another strange little curiosity: accounts of flying shields seen in battle, reported by historians like Herodotus. Was this just dramatic storytelling? Or were ancient Greek soldiers actually seeing aircraft thousands of years before modern UFO reports? The Karlsupe civilization in Peru is one of the oldest in the Americas, dating back to around 3000 BCE. Yet they built massive pyramids, had complex urban planning, and even developed a mysterious form of record keeping using knotted strings. They seem to have done this with no outside influence, at least no influence that we know of. Unlike other ancient civilizations, the Karlsupe didn't leave behind a lot of warlike artifacts. Signs of massive conflicts, no battle records, just peaceful, advanced city building. Some researchers believe this points to them having had help from a superior intelligence that guided them toward a civilization focused on science and trade rather than conflict and power. There's also the uncanny similarity between their pyramids and those found in Egypt. How did these two civilizations, separated by thousands of miles, come up with the same type of structures? Was it just a coincidence, or were they both following the same blueprint, one that might not have originated on Earth? The Nazca people lived in what's now Peru between 100 BCE and 800 CE, and they left behind something that still baffles people today: these massive geoglyphs known as the Nazca lines. We're talking giant animals, humanoid figures, and geometric shapes all etched into the desert floor. The thing is, you can really only see them from way up in the air. And this is where the alien theories come in. Some believe the Nazca made these lines as messages or landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors. After all, why go through all that effort to make something you couldn't even fully appreciate from the ground? There's also the theory that the Nazca had help from advanced beings who guided them in creating these massive designs. Obviously, there are skeptics who argue that they were purely ceremonial or meant to be seen from surrounding hills, but the fact that some lines stretch for miles and form perfectly straight paths, it does make you wonder who or what were they trying to communicate with? Well, of course, no list of possible alien-influenced civilizations would be complete without ancient Egypt. The pyramids alone have had people speculating things for centuries. These massive structures are so precisely built that modern engineers still aren't completely sure how they were constructed. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, is aligned almost perfectly with the true north, and the measurements of its base are oddly connected to the dimensions of the Earth itself. Did the Egyptians really figure this out on their own? Or did someone or something give them the knowledge? Then there are these strange depictions in Egyptian art. Some carvings show beings with particularly large eyes, what look like advanced devices. Even more bizarre are the light bulb carvings in the Dendera temple, which some believe depicted electrical technology. Egyptian mythology also talks about the gods descending from the sky and sharing knowledge with humanity. Were these gods just myths, or were they actual beings from another world? If so, what was their purpose in guiding one of the most powerful civilizations in history?
Is Utsi. Utsi is a Neolithic mummy, a natural mummy, so called because his embalming process was not intentional. It was the arid and cold weather of the extreme altitude of the Tyrolean mountains where he passed which was responsible for this mummification, and it was so complete that he was preserved as he fell for more than 5,000 years. Due to this exquisite level of preservation, there are numerous fascinating details that were discovered. Utsi, for example, was covered in tattoos, but these were found to be medicinal tattoos, hash lines and marks made over old injuries, the pain of the tattoo helping to mask the pain of the injury. Utsi was about 45 when he passed, having lived a hard life and already grizzled by the hard world he lived in, and he carried numerous fascinating artifacts which eventually helped us unravel the mystery of his passing. Thanks to the analysis of his stomach contents and the pollen therein, we've been able to map out his path through the elevation of the mountains. It seems that Utsi was actually driven into the mountains, forced to flee for his life. He had eaten 2 and 8 hours before his passing, and had eaten the meals at different altitudes, showing that he was forced to continue marching through the mountains. We now know that he initially descended into the valley, worked on his tools, and was there accosted. He suffered a defensive wound to the palm of his hand as he tried to block the blade of a stone implement, managing to escape his pursuers, and then worked on repairing his arrows. Then something happened which drove him even farther into the mountains. Likely as he fled for his life, he would be hit in the back with a stone-tipped arrow at high altitude, which eventually ended his life. But Utsi wasn't robbed. He had a very valuable and very rare copper adze with him, and yet none of his belongings, even the fine tools, were taken. This likely means that whoever ended him knew him, wanted to do him harm, and chased him into the Tyrolean mountains with the pure intention of ending his life. But why? To this day, the mystery slowly unravels as we make greater discoveries about the life of Neolithic humans in southern Europe. Next is the Rosetta Stone. Perhaps the single most critical and influential discovery in the history of Egyptology, the Rosetta Stone was the key which unlocked the Egyptian written languages, allowing researchers to finally translate hieroglyphics and Demotic script. The Rosetta Stone is one of numerous stones carved on the command of King Ptolemy V, containing a decree which established a divine cult of their leader, worshipping the young king as a new god. But the decree itself has taken a backseat in terms of the influence and importance of the way in which the decree was carved. The stele is comprised of 3 large paragraphs, each saying the same concepts and words but in slightly different translations. The fact that the same message was written almost word for word in 3 different languages on the same stone allowed researchers to use their knowledge of ancient Greek to then translate the Egyptian languages left behind. This opened up the possibility for researchers to actually understand the vast amounts of writing all around the ancient Egyptian empire. It was so critical to our understanding of the ancient Egyptian language that to this day, the phrase Rosetta Stone means anything which unlocks a significant discovery or paradigm shift. The discoveries of the great necropolis of Saqqara and numerous other sites would mean far less if we didn't know how to translate the writings that surrounded them. Next is Pompeii. Pompeii is especially notable because it offers a rare opportunity for researchers to examine an immediately preserved snapshot of Roman life. The city was buried by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, which destroyed the city in a single afternoon, buried under toxic ash and rock. While horrifying, this had the beneficial effect, for us today at least, of instantly encasing the entire city, preserving it as it was with no influence from from the rest of history. This is an unparalleled level of access and accuracy through a window into the past. Very few sites have this level of in situ importance. Hundreds of entombed Romans have been recovered, many in heartbreaking positions, which serve to remind us that these were all people, just like you or me, and while the ash fell, they held their loved ones, prayed, tried to hide, and in some cases tried to get in a little bit of fun before their world ended. It's considered to this day to be one of the best sources of knowledge and information on the daily life of a Roman citizen within the empire.
Next, we head to China with the Sanxingdui, an ancient culture and archaeological site found in 1986. It's one of the most mysterious archaeological finds in China. Now, there were clues about an ancient society in the area discovered all the way back in 1927, but a much larger scale excavation was carried out in 1986 after workers digging a ditch stumbled on these two large pits filled with thousands of artifacts, which turned out to be over 3,000 years old. The Sanxingdui culture produced incredible art and craftsmanship unlike anything seen from other ancient Chinese cultures. Included in the artifacts were bronze masks, gold and jade items, and intricate statues. One of the biggest mysteries of Sanxingdui is why the civilization suddenly vanished. The artifacts seem to hint that they were a highly developed society, but there aren't any written records or any clear explanations for why they would have disappeared. It also seems like they were different from other ancient Chinese cultures. Their art and their artifacts are so unique that they don't seem to fit with the known history and development of ancient China. So when it comes to who these people were and what their culture was like, we really can't say for sure.
Next up, we have the Boskop man, a potential prehistoric, now extinct, human-like species that could have lived as recently as 10,000 years ago and might have had craniums much larger than our own. It is estimated that their brains could have been up to 30% larger than our own, and if that was the case, their IQ would have been around 149. The average IQ in America is 98. However, the increased intelligence would, of course, depend on where the Boskop man carried the majority of their brain mass, as intelligence increase generally happens in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is largely responsible for our highest cognitive functions like decision-making, memory, and self-awareness. With that being said, perhaps their frontal cortices were so big that they became so self-aware they ended up enlightened and eventually decided to become one with the universe. This, of course, is all scientific speculation, seeing as the only evidence of the peoples are partial skull fragments, but many scientists seem to believe the theory, so personally, I'm on board with the highly intelligent prehistoric men that probably would have beat me in a game of chess, but I think anyone would. I suck at chess.
Next on the list, we had the city of Cahokia, which is located in what is now Collinsville, Illinois. At one time, it was a thriving city built by the Mississippian culture. Today, visitors can explore the city, or what's left of it anyway. There's not much. It is pretty cool though. It just looks like a series of oddly shaped hills, but these hills weren't naturally formed. They're man-made dirt mounds that were once home to thousands of people. Cahokia started as a collection of small villages around 1050 AD, but by 1250, it was one of the largest settlements in the Americas. But then, it was mysteriously abandoned or destroyed. We still don't know exactly what happened. There are no written records from that time, and there wasn't a whole lot of archaeological evidence left behind.
Next up, we have my favorite. I don't care if you don't care about it. It's Atlantis, the peoples of Atlantis. And before you run to the comments to tell me you don't believe it or you've heard it before, sit back, relax, and listen to some evidence you might have not heard before. Did you know that there are actually records of Atlantis written by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who described the city being located just outside the Strait of Gibraltar? For centuries, people thought that Plato was off his rocker. Many people still do. But what many people don't know is that while everyone is out searching for the lost city in the deep ocean, it might have already been found. in space. Well, it was discovered from space, and it's located in Mauritania, Africa. In 1965, the Richat structure, a deeply eroded dominal structure, was discovered by 2 astronauts while flying over Africa. While the area is barren and dry today, evidence suggests that at one time, the entire structure was submerged completely underwater. Sound familiar? Could this truly be the lost city of Atlantis, or is it still just out there waiting to be found? Or if you think it doesn't exist, you're wrong.
And finally, we have what are known as the Big Circles, mysterious structures found in a number of locations across the Middle East. The massive circular shapes are only visible from above, and they're made of stone walls or small stone mounds. They've been spotted in different locations in the region, mainly in Jordan and Syria. But what were they built for? Nobody really knows. One of the strangest aspects of the Big Circles is their age, which is hard to even figure out without any artifacts connected with them or any written records. Archaeologists have found it tough to date these structures accurately, leading to a lot of debates about their origins and even the cultures that might have created them. Lots of theories have come about in the attempt to unravel the purpose of the circles. Some researchers have said that the circles served as burial sites. Others speculate that they may have been used to house animals, but the walls aren't really high enough for that, most of them only having been built a few feet high. Of course, we have a bit of a similarity here to crop circles, and hey, we all know the conspiracies surrounding them, so I find this one kind of cool. Were there really giants roaming the earth in ancient times? Well, with cases of massive 8, 10, 12, even 18-foot bones being unearthed?
It certainly seems like there's more to our history than we're often taught. Let's check it out.
So pictured here is a man named Les Eaton lying next to a skeleton in a doctor's office. Keep in mind, Les Eaton was 6 feet tall, and this thing just dwarfs him. The skeleton was discovered in 1933 near Steelville, Missouri. A young boy had been searching for arrowheads when he stumbled on something a little more interesting, a skeleton measuring over 8 feet in length. The skeleton was in pretty good condition, too. A local doctor named Dr. Parker had it displayed in his office for a while, allowing people to come and gawk at the sheer size of the remains or lie next to it and have someone take a photo of them. Eventually, it was sent to the Smithsonian Institution for further study, but that's really all the information there is about this guy. After it was shipped off, it was never heard about again. There's been little to no follow-up information available, so it's definitely understandable why some people think there could be something sus going on here.
8 foot plus would be considered giant today, so imagine all the necks that would have broken looking up at this guy sometime between 1000 and 200 BC, when the average height of a female was merely 5'1" and the average height of a male was 5'8", which, to be fair, isn't that far from the average height of men and women today, with women coming in at 5.4 and men 5.9. Still, the discovery of an 8 foot 1.5 inch skeleton was a massive find when it was excavated near a massive burial mound in Ohio back in 2012. At the time, the skeleton belonged to the tallest man ever recorded in human history. Of course, today that record has been broken by 9.5 inches, but still. Along with the incredibly tall skeleton, lead researcher on the project, Hugh, found many other bones of unusual size, including what he described as a giant jawbone. Oh, and all of the bones found at the site were authenticated by the Smithsonian Institution. So you can rest easy tonight knowing that this giant prehistoric man was 100% undeniably real. Or you can toss and turn through nightmares of him chasing you through a dark forest. It's your choice.
Back in 1870, a story came out in the paper about the discovery of an 18-foot skeleton. Not the skeleton of some gigantic animal either. No, this was said to be a human skeleton, or something resembling a human. Really hard to say if an 18-foot tall giant can be classified as simply a human. Now, could this one have been an incredible exaggeration or a hoax? Of course, but it is really fascinating that this was a story that had been published in a newspaper. The story came out in the Oil City Times in 1870. It read, "On Tuesday morning last, while Mr. William Thompson, assisted by Mr. Robert R. Smith, was engaged in making an excavation near the house of the former, about half a mile north of West Hickory, they exhumed an enormous his helmet of iron, which was corroded with rust. Further digging brought to light a sword, which measured 9 feet in length. After some little time, they discovered the bones of 2 enormous feet. Following up on the leads they had unexpectedly struck, in a few hours' time they had unearthed the well-preserved remains of an enormous giant belonging to a species of the human family, which probably inhabited this and other parts of the world, at the time of which the Bible speaks when it says, "And there were giants in those days." The bones of the skeleton are a remarkable white. The teeth are all in their places and all of extraordinary size. When he was in the flesh, he must have stood 18 feet tall in his stockings. These remarkable relics will be shipped to New York early next week. These remains were found about 12 feet under the surface of a mound which had been thrown up probably centuries ago.
Sometimes the government hides things from the public in order to keep us safe, and sometimes the government hides things from us because they want to keep us dumb, which is probably the case when it comes to the 12-foot skeleton that was dug up and was promptly reburied in 1819 in Lompoc Rancho, California. Now, to be fair, when the giant skeleton was dug up by soldiers living on the ranch who hacked their way through a thick layer of cemented gravel to reach the sarcophagus holding the skeleton, the natives of the land deemed it a god and asked that it be reburied. But you're telling me that since then no one has used any kind of scanning technology or taken any soil samples from the burial site in an effort to authenticate and study the giant bones? I gotta call BS on this one. My guess, the skeleton isn't there anymore because it was taken a long time ago to be studied by people who don't want us to know it exists. Maybe it's an alien.
The Bulgarian giant. Back in 2015, downtown in the ancient city of Varna, archaeologists found the remains of an exceptionally tall man for the time he was alive. While excavating a Copper Age necropolis near Varna, researchers uncovered the remains of a skeleton dating back approximately 6,500 years. It was found partially buried beneath an ancient fortress wall, positioned east-west, with its hands placed on the waist, which was how a lot of burial practices happened at the time. The skeleton was much taller than the average person of that era, close to 7 feet in height. The skeleton was found in a carefully dug grave, meaning the big tall man likely held a high position in their society. Some things just never change.
In 1895, the Smithsonian purchased an 8-foot, 4-inch tall mummy for $500. In 1908, they called it a hoax, but experts aren't so sure. The first report of the giant appeared in 1895. It claimed the mummy was 9 feet tall when in reality it was just 2 inches less than 8.5. Still, the Smithsonian made the decision to purchase the artifact for $500 that same year after examining it and declaring it to be a legitimate find. Now, all of a sudden, 13 years later in 1908, they called it a hoax and claimed that it was made of gelatin. I really don't know how a bunch of America's best scientists could have possibly missed that for an entire 13 years. Not to mention it wasn't cheap. $500 back then is equal to well over 14 grand today, and the Smithsonian didn't have the same funding in the 1890s that it does now. I'm just saying something's not adding up, and what's even stranger is that something quite similar happened in Oklahoma around the same time. A mummified giant measuring in at 8 feet 5 inches was put on display, only to disappear shortly after word began to spread. It sounds a bit like a cover-up if you ask me, which you kinda did. I mean, you clicked on the video.
Even the New York Times came out with an article about a giant. Back in February of 1902, an article came out with the title reading, "New Mexico Discovery, 12-foot giant found." According to the article, a discovery was made near an ancient burial ground. Luciana Quintana, a landowner, had found 2 stones with mysterious inscriptions, and beneath were bones from a frame that was estimated to be at least 12 feet long. Excavators said they found a 4-foot-long forearm and a well-preserved jaw, with lower teeth ranging from the size of a hickory nut to that of a large walnut. That was how they just described sizes back then, I guess, just used nuts. The giant's chest reportedly had a circumference of 7 feet. I wonder how many nuts that is. At the time, they speculated that thousands of other giant skeletons were waiting being to be found. Legends have been told by early Spanish invaders about giant humanoids roaming the plains, and Native American carvings also seemed to depict some race of massive human.
Directly after a groundbreaking discovery made in 1959, lead researcher Donald Dregu was quoted saying, "The individual was of large proportions. When measured in the tomb, his length was approximately 7 feet 2 inches, and all of the long boxes were very heavy." The skeleton in question was found in Cresap Mound in West Virginia inside of a burial mound containing at least 5 other skeletons, a clay bench, and a fire basin, which might explain why the top half of the 7 foot 2 inch skeleton was burned. Well, it explains how, not really why. And it also doesn't explain why the bones of the skeleton were unusually heavy either. At the time the discovery was made, it was massive, but nothing really came of it, leading myself and many others to wonder why. What are they hiding?
Scattered across Sardinia are the famous giants' tombs, built during the island's Nuragic period. These structures, often reaching up to 100 feet in length, have been the cause of a lot of local legends, mainly that these tombs were built to house some very large people, maybe even giants. But the mainstream archaeology world explains them as communal burial sites. The tombs are long chambers constructed from massive slabs placed vertically and horizontally to form a corridor-like structure. The chamber is then covered with smaller rocks and earth, creating a mound. A distinctive feature of these tombs is their entrances, which had a semicircular row of standing stones. They look pretty cool, definitely something I'd want to check out one day.
A giant mound shaped like a giant snake containing giant skeletons. Fitting, right? Serpent Mound in Ohio is the world's largest surviving effigy mound, which is super cool in and of itself, but it got a whole lot cooler when, in the 1890s, Professor Frederick Ward Puntham decided to excavate some of the mounds located next to the effigy. What did he find? Well, seeing as this is a video about ancient giants, it would be pretty weird if I said unicorns. In reality, the professor found multiple 6-foot-tall skeletons and possibly one that was 7 feet. In a postcard sent by the professor, the giant skeleton can be seen laid out on a large stone, and underneath the skeleton it says, "Skeleton of mound builder, 7 feet in length, serpent mound." The only thing is, the skeleton is cut off at the shins, and the professor never confirmed if the measurement was an estimate of what the height of the entire skeleton might have been, or what the found bones measured up to, meaning that the skeleton could have possibly measured in at much taller than 7 feet, or perhaps slightly shorter. Again, the discovery didn't really go anywhere. It kind of just fell off the face of the earth, leading us to wonder why.
Sumerians weren't just one of the first civilizations, they were also one of the strangest. These guys popped up out of nowhere, seemingly, around 3100 BCE in what's now Iraq, bringing with them advanced knowledge of writing, astronomy, and law. And there's also something else they're known for, though. Their myths, more specifically the Anunnaki, beings who came down from the heavens and were said to have given them their knowledge. Now, ancient people talking about receiving knowledge from a higher power isn't all that unique. You're going to hear it more on this list as well, but some think that the Sumerians were actually describing an alien race. See, some of their artwork seems to show figures that look eerily like modern depictions of aliens, tall, slender, and humanoid, but not really, and of course, coming from the sky. They also wrote about these beings, describing how the Anunnaki created humans to do hard labor, like digging canals and working the land. Well, some theorists take their story and say, well, what if creating humans actually meant genetic engineering? Were the Sumerians just writing myth, or were they actually recording something much more literal? Some researchers believe the Sumerians' rapid advancement doesn't make sense without some kind of outside influence either. How did they develop advanced irrigation and the world's first cities almost overnight? And let's not forget their knowledge of the solar system. Some of their texts describe the night sky in ways that were pretty ahead of their time. So is it possible they were getting their astronomy lessons from advanced beings from another planet. You probably don't need me to tell you that the Maya were ahead of their time. They had insanely accurate calendars, complex cities, and a deep understanding of the cosmos, so it probably comes as no surprise that they're often associated with theories about ancient aliens. Here's where a lot of that comes from. Some of their carvings and artifacts look like they're depicting figures in spacesuits. One of the most famous examples is the lid of Pakal's tomb. Some say it shows him piloting what looks like a spacecraft, with buttons and knobs and controls and what looks like a breathing apparatus and flames shooting out at the bottom. Traditional archaeologists say it's just a stylized representation of the afterlife or something, but let's be real, if you showed that carving to someone with zero context, they'd probably say it looks like a dude in some sort of spaceship, or something just advanced for the time. And then there's their obsession with the gods descending from the sky, often depicted with serpentine or bird-like features. Now, was this just fantasy, or were they actually recording encounters with beings from up in space? Their myths even mention beings known as the Star People, who supposedly came down to teach them wisdom. Some of their temples and pyramids also line up with stars and planets in a way that makes it seem like they knew way more about space than you'd think possible for such an ancient society. So were they just a highly advanced civilization, or did they have a little guidance from up above? Ancient Indian texts are full of wild descriptions of these flying machines called vimanas. These weren't just vague mentions of something flying through the sky. These texts go into crazy detail about the mechanics, the weapons, and even the fuel these crafts supposedly used. The Mahabharata and Ramayana talk about epic aerial battles, beams of light that could destroy entire cities, and weapons that sound suspiciously like modern-day nukes. Now, of course, most people think these stories are just myths, but some believe they may have been describing real events, possibly involving extraterrestrial technology. And even stranger, some of these texts describe the Vimanas as being piloted by beings with godlike abilities, often descending from the heavens to interact with humans. Were these just religious visions, or did these ancient people have a more literal understanding of what was going on? Whether or not these texts are just stories, it's pretty cool that they sound more like science fiction than your more traditional mythological tales. The Inca built one of the most impressive empires in history, and they did it without the wheel, iron tools, or a writing system, at least not one we can fully understand. But their stonework is where things get really weird. Sites like Sacsay Huaman have massive, perfectly cut stones that fit together without mortar, almost like a puzzle. And some of these stones weigh over 100 tons, and we still don't know exactly how they moved and shaped them like that. Some say it was just good old-fashioned manpower and ingenuity, but others think they might have had some help. The legends of the Inca mention sky gods who came down and taught them knowledge. Were these just mythological figures, or could they have been something else entirely? The Dogon people of Mali have a knowledge of astronomy that's bizarrely advanced for a tribe that, by all accounts, shouldn't have had access to telescopes. Specifically, they've known about Sirius B, a white dwarf star invisible to the naked eye, for centuries. Western astronomers didn't confirm its existence until the 20th century, but the Dogon had detailed knowledge about it long before that. They claim they got this information from beings called the Nomo, amphibious, fish-like deities from the Sirius system who came from the sky and brought knowledge. Again, this sounds a lot like extraterrestrial contact, but is it just a myth? Did they just figure out everything they know on their own? Or were they actually visited by beings from the Sirius system? China's mythology is full of sky beings, flying chariots and rulers who claim to be descended from celestial visitors. One of the most famous examples is the Yellow Emperor, who was said to have arrived on a flying dragon and later ascended back into the heavens. Then there are the carvings and artifacts showing figures with elongated skulls and strange non-human features. Some even resemble what modern UFO enthusiasts would call gray aliens. There are also ancient accounts of metallic flying machines, energy weapons, and even what some interpret as nuclear explosions in early Chinese texts. So, again, could these stories be describing actual encounters with extraterrestrials, or are they just highly exaggerated myths? Given China's long history and meticulous record keeping, it's not hard to wonder if some of these stories have have more truth to them than we may think.
Next up, we are talking about the Hindu Kala Chakra. Ancient Hindu texts speak of the Kala Chakra, or the Wheel of Time, which represents time as a continuous cycle. Birth, death, and rebirth. This idea of cyclical time suggests that what happens in one era is destined to repeat in the next. This concept goes beyond philosophical musings and touches on something far more profound. Ancient Hindu texts like the Mahabharata seem to suggest that civilizations may rise and fall in a loop, with future events somehow tied to past actions. Could ancient civilizations have understood that time wasn't a straight line, but a series of repeating cycles, allowing them to anticipate future events based on the rhythms of the past? Next, we are talking about the Incas' astronomical knowledge. The Inca civilization was one of the most advanced in terms of its understanding of time. They crafted calendars based on lunar and solar cycles, designed perfectly to predict agricultural seasons and celestial events. But this wasn't just about farming. The Inca also believed that these cycles determined the fate of the empire. Some experts believe the Inca could predict major events, including the rise and fall of dynasties, using these astronomical observations. This suggests that the Inca may have known more about the future than just the weather. Their calendar systems could have been fine-tuned instruments, allowing them to read time and the future like an open book. Next, we are talking about the Sumerians and the Anunnaki. The ancient Sumerians, regarded as one of the first great civilizations, left behind texts that tell of the Anunnaki, gods who supposedly arrived from the stars with advanced knowledge. These beings, according to Sumerian lore, had the ability to shape the future and impart their knowledge to humanity. Some scholars suggest that the Anunnaki may have shared knowledge of future technological advancements, predicting things like space travel and even the genetic manipulation of humans. Could these ancient gods have left behind not just warnings, but actual time-based knowledge to guide the Sumerians, and perhaps even influence the course of future history? Next, we are talking about the ancient Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead, an ancient Egyptian text, wasn't just a manual for navigating the afterlife, it was a guide to understanding the passage of time beyond death. The Egyptians viewed time as a cyclical force, with life and death not as opposing forces, but as interconnected. They believed that by understanding the timing of their rituals and aligning themselves with the stars, they could manipulate the flow of time. Could this ancient belief in eternal life be tied to an understanding of time travel? The idea that the soul transcends time suggests that the Egyptians might have had access to knowledge beyond their immediate era, possibly even glimpsing at events that were yet to come. And finally, to end this list today, we are talking about the ancient sea explorers. Ancient civilizations like the Phoenicians are credited for some of the earliest long-distance sea voyages, but their knowledge may have gone beyond simple navigation. It's believed that these explorers used their astronomical knowledge not just to chart the seas, but to predict the future, aligning their journeys with celestial patterns that held significance for future events. Some theorists believe these voyages were part of a much larger plan, with ancient mariners secretly navigating through time by syncing their travels with the cycles of the stars. Were these ancient sea explorers simply ahead of their time, or did they know how to unlock the secrets of time travel through the stars?
The Amarok is a creature from Greenlandic Inuit mythology, and for a long time it was considered nothing more than a myth until an incident in the 19th century. In Inuit folklore, the Amarok is described as a giant wolf, renowned for its enormous size and strength. According to the tales, this wolf is said to hunt alone, especially at night, preying on those who violate traditional taboos or are foolish enough to be outside in the dark. In the 19th century, the perception of the Amarok actually changed from being nothing more than folklore to possible reality. So a creature fitting the description of the legendary wolf was shot, described as a truly immense pure white wolf. The hunter who killed the creature sent its pelt to the Copenhagen Museum in Denmark, and this was seemingly concrete evidence of the existence of a massive white wolf in the Arctic region. Now, whether this thing was actually the legendary Amarok or just an especially large wolf remains to be seen, but if you ever find yourself in Denmark, check out the museum for yourself. Maybe that pelt is still on display.
The tale of the Haugboy comes from ancient Icelandic and Norse folklore, civilizations that had a very different perspective on spirits and the afterlife. They believed that spirits did not ascend or descend to any kind of heaven or hell-like realms, but rather they remained in the bodies of the deceased until said bodies became disturbed. Because of this, ancient Nordics and Icelanders took great care and many precautions when burying their dead. Deceased members of the community were buried with their toes tied together and needles in their feet. Furthermore, because these civilizations believed that a deceased person could only enter a home from the door which they left, when the corpse was removed from a home, the entrance from which they left was promptly sealed up to protect against any kind of re-entry.
And now a creature from Zimbabwean folklore, the Kangamato. Descriptions of this creature vary somewhat, but most accounts agree that it's this big, nasty bird or bat with a wingspan that can rival your typical Cessna plane. Reports often mention a beak full of sharp teeth. It's usually depicted looking almost like a pterodactyl. Locals in Zambia and Zimbabwe have been talking about the Kangamato for ages. The name itself translates to breaker of boats in the local language, which doesn't exactly inspire warm and fuzzy feelings. One of the reasons this cryptid stands out is because it's not just something that lurks in the depths of some dense forest somewhere. No, instead the Kangamato supposedly likes to crash parties near rivers and lakes. It's said to have a thing for feasting on unsuspecting folks who dare to venture too close to the water's edge. So imagine trying to enjoy a peaceful picnic or a birthday party, and then suddenly you're in a scene from Jurassic Park.
The Japanese legend of Baku, the dream-eating spirit animal, has been around far longer than you or I. But unlike the subjects of all the other legends on this list, the Baku is actually a malevolent spirit that looks kind of like a tapir, a pig-shaped animal with a long snout, and this spirit eats nightmares. While this legend is incredibly popular in Japan, the story of the Baku actually started in China prior to the 14th century. And in some versions of this legend, in order to invoke the protection of the spirit, who has also been described as having the legs of a tiger, the head of an elephant, and the piercing eyes of a rhinoceros, one must draw a picture of the spirit before falling asleep. Now, after learning about all of these other haunted legends, I think I know what I'll be doing tonight.
The Kajanok is a cryptid creature said to inhabit the shallow bays and lakes of Greenland and the Canadian Arctic. It's described as a colossal aquatic arachnid, which certainly conjures up some pretty terrifying images. It's said to patiently wait for prey on the seabed near shoals and inlets, chomping at seals as they swim overhead. The giant sea spider depiction is often more common for the Canadian Inuit, drawing comparisons to the appearance of a huntsman spider, but on a much grander scale, obviously. A kayaker near Baffin Island in the early 20th century claimed to have witnessed this creature. Venturing into western Greenland, the Kajanok is described as more of a sea scorpion around the size of a rowboat. Lakes Natsilik and Umanak are said to be its home. Which version of this creature would you prefer to meet? Giant sea scorpion or giant spider? Take your pick. They're both bad, but I think a spider-looking thing would be much creepier to me.
And finally, we have the ancient Japanese legend of Nu, a mythical creature with the body of a tiger, the face of a monkey, and the tail of a snake, said to be the harbinger of sickness and bad luck. The Nu are not new at all. In fact, they are some of the oldest creatures described in Japanese legend, with some tales of the beast dating all the way back to the 12th century. In the Tale of Heike, a Japanese story about the ancient 12th century war, the Nu was said to have visited the Emperor of Japan, who became ill not long after. Furthermore, after the visit, every time the emperor closed his eyes, he was bombarded with vicious nightmares. The ailments and torment continued until one day a brave soldier fired an arrow at the gnu and killed it. To this day, it's believed by some that the mound at the shore of the sea in Japan is the final resting place of the fearsome beast.
One time, the Vinca civilization was one of the largest prehistoric cultures in Europe. They were around for about 1500 years. From about 5500 BCE to 4000 BC. They were in parts of what is now Serbia and Romania. The civilization is named after the village of Vinca and the Danube River, where some of the biggest archaeological discoveries were made in the 20th century. The Vinca people had advanced metalworking skills, especially when it came to copper. They excavated the earliest known mine in Europe, and they actually may have been the first civilization in the world to work with copper. These people didn't have a fully developed writing system, but archaeologists have found examples of proto-writing, symbols and marks that don't form a language necessarily, but may have been used as a kind of early form of communication. Their society was also quite organized. Their homes were carefully planned with designated areas for waste disposal. They've also found children's toys during excavations like animal figures and rattles. The Zapotec civilization, ever heard of them? They're usually overshadowed by the more famous Aztecs and Maya, but they were one of the earliest cultures in Mesoamerica. They were pioneers when it came to agriculture and developed one of the first writing systems in the region. Their biggest city was Monte Alban, built around the 5th century BCE. It was around for around 1200 years and at its peak housed around 25,000 people. The ruling class was made up of priests, warriors, and artists overseeing the lower classes, and they subjugated nearby areas, assimilating them into their civilization. What caused their decline? It's not entirely clear. Monte Alban was mostly left intact when the civilization began to fade, so it doesn't seem like there was a catastrophic event that caused the downfall. Could have been economic trouble, which caused people to up and look for work in other places. Eventually, the remaining groups split up into other city-states, which started to compete against each other, which led to the end of their culture altogether. The Hittites. These were an ancient Anatolian civilization that came about around the 2nd millennium BCE in what is now modern-day Turkey. They formed a powerful empire, reaching their peak in the mid-14th century BCE under a king named Suppiluliuma I. At the time, they controlled a large territory that included much of Anatolia and parts of northern Syria. For centuries, the Hittites were only known about through references in other cultures, mainly because their civilization had collapsed by the end of the 12th century BCE. The remnants of their empire was lost to time, and it wasn't until the 19th century that physical evidence of them was rediscovered. In 1834, a French scholar by the name of Charles Texier found what would later be known as the Hittite ruins. At the time, he didn't recognize how significant they were. In the late 1800s, though, archaeological findings at sites like Koltepe revealed trade records mentioning the land of Hatti. Then in 1906, archaeologist Hugo Winkler uncovered over 10,000 clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform, one of the oldest known forms of writing. And these tablets revealed tons of stuff about the Hittite Empire and how it was governed, their culture, and their language. The Nabateans were an Arab civilization that lived in northern Arabia and the southern Levant. Their most famous city, Petra, is in modern-day Jordan and was a major trading hub that connected a number of trade routes across the region. The Nabateans lived between the 4th and 2nd centuries BCE and built a kingdom centered around trade, becoming pretty wealthy and influential. They were very independent, able to fend off several attempts by empires, including the Romans, to control them, but in 106 CE, Emperor Trajan annexed their kingdom into the Roman Empire. The Nabateans still managed to preserve a large part of their culture though, which included finely crafted ceramics and very distinctive architecture, like the rock-cut buildings found in Petra. Their history dates back to at least 312 BCE, when they were first mentioned in battle reports. As they expanded, they gained control over key territories, including Damascus. Petra became quite the city, home to around 20,000 people at its height. Over time, the Nabateans adopted Greek as the dominant language, and by the 5th century, many of them had converted to Christianity. The civilization's decline began with the rise of new Arab groups, and eventually Nabatean culture dissipated. The Clovis people. These were an ancient group that lived in North America around 13,000 years ago. They are known for their stone tools, especially their fluted projectile points called Clovis points. The Clovers were some of the earliest known human inhabitants in North America. In 1929, a 19-year-old named Ridgely Whiteman discovered a Clovis site near Blackwater Draw in New Mexico. The site contains stone tools along with the remains of mammoths, which was evidence that there was human activity during the Pleistocene era. Before this, another big discovery happened in 1927 at the Folsom site, where the remains of a now extinct bison species were found alongside human-made tools. This was the first definitive evidence of humans in the Americas during that period. Excavations at Blackwater Draw revealed thousands of artifacts over several years, confirming the existence of a culture that relied heavily on hunting large game like mammoths. The Clovis people were highly mobile hunter-gatherers, but their culture didn't last forever. As the megafauna began to dwindle, so did the way of life for the Clovis people. That, along with the extinction of mammoths, which they may have relied heavily on for food.
Next is Sutton Hoo. Sutton Hoo was one of the first and most complete discoveries coming from medieval England ever discovered, especially in 1937 when it was initially uncovered. The site consists of two large burial mounds from the Anglo-Saxon period, each of which is a ship burial, where a large warship was dragged ashore and filled with graved goods and the deceased before it was then buried under a mountain of dirt. This dirt burial allowed these sites to remain untouched for 1,300 years, preserving their contents shockingly well. Inside were numerous fascinating and highly ornate artifacts, many of which were made of finely worked gold and other precious metals and stones. This exquisite find of hundreds of artifacts and almost entirely preserved ships was actually discovered by an amateur archaeologist, Basil Brown, who did an exceptional job of excavating and preserving the site until it was taken over by professional archaeologists from nearby universities. To this day, excavation continues as more and more details about the East Anglian Anglo-Saxons and their time in Britain is revealed. Next are the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a collection of ancient scrolls discovered in the West Bank before it was invaded and occupied. The scrolls are incredibly critical pieces of history which reveal a significant amount about what life was like 23 to 1900 years ago for the people of the Levant. Much of this has been critical to our understanding of Jewish and Middle Eastern history and has given a great insight into the past of the Levant. Hundreds of scrolls were recovered, and yet only a few of them have been able to be deciphered. Many of these scrolls spent centuries in the salt of the Dead Sea, and they have aged considerably over the millennia. Many of them are simply too fragile to handle or even unravel, and so instead, researchers are developing new techniques and technologies which X-ray the scrolls and analyze the patterns of ink pigmentation, along with numerous other details which, when put into a computer program, can be formed into a 3D render of the scroll, which can then be digitally unraveled and read. This has only happened for a few scrolls, but is very promising and will possibly lead to even more formally unreadable scrolls becoming founts of historical knowledge. Next is the Combat Gulf. During a routine pollution survey in the Gulf of Combat, researchers stumbled upon the remains of an ancient city, which was a surprising find. Using sonar technology, they detected geometric shapes beneath the sea's floor, revealing eventually a vast city complex covering about 24 square kilometers. This remarkable discovery could change our understanding of history as we know it, with some claims that it predates the Bronze Age Indus Valley civilization, previously thought to be the oldest urban culture. However, skepticism remains. While many agree the site appears man-made, questions about its age and the artifacts found still persist. The area is challenging due to heavy tidal movements that could damage the site and mix in artifacts from elsewhere. Yet, many researchers believe this is indeed an ancient city lost beneath the waves, with human remains and numerous artifacts suggesting that it was quickly submerged, possibly in a catastrophic flood. Some have since speculated that the Indus River Valley civilization, located nearby on the same subcontinent, may have actually descended from the Kambat civilization, carrying tales of the flood that evolved into myths across numerous subsequent cultures.
One of the most fascinating things in archaeology has to be the disappearance of mass amounts of people, leaving behind their artwork, artifacts, and architecture, and questions about who they were and why they left their homes and cities behind. Seeing as we don't have the technology to fly around the world in 10 minutes yet, we're going to share these incredible places with you through the power of the World Wide Web. And we're starting off the list with a pretty amazing civilization, the Indus. They existed from around 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. It's often called one of the world's oldest civilizations, but they were pretty advanced. They had sanitation systems that wouldn't be matched until the Roman times, which is pretty crazy. They had busy cities with well-planned streets, houses, and even indoor bathrooms, apparently. Two major cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, are probably the most well-known. These cities had intricate brickwork, drainage systems, and there's evidence of a written script that we haven't even been able to fully decipher to this day. These folks were not just good at city building, they were also savvy traders. The Indus people traded with Mesopotamia, using boats to transport goods. Agriculture was a big deal too, with well-irrigated fields for growing crops. But around 1300 BCE, the civilization started to fall off. We're not entirely sure why. Some think it could be due to climate change affecting their water sources, so people up and left migrating southeast. Today, all that's left of the ancient city of Angkor in Cambodia is Angkor Wat, this beautiful temple complex, which also happens to be the largest religious structure in the entire world. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, and as large as it is, it's still only just one part of a city that used to be larger than modern-day New York City. Angkor, the capital of the Khmer Empire. This place had magnificent temples, including Angkor Wat, so you can only imagine how many more amazing structures there were, considering how vast this place was. But around the 15th century, the city declined and was eventually abandoned. There may have been environmental stress here. The complex irrigation system may have strained resources, causing soil depletion and impacting food production. There could have also been prolonged droughts that affected their ability to support a large population. Researchers aren't exactly sure how many people lived there, of course, but considering the size, there were probably a lot. And there were also power struggles and invasions, which weakened the Khmer Empire, eventually leading to the decline of their largest city, followed by the empire itself about 300 years later. This next civilization was also pretty incredible, but things didn't end quite as smoothly for them as the first point on this list. Rather than people just moving and settling somewhere else because of issues with agriculture, it looks like things ended pretty violently for the Anasazi. The Anasazi were an ancient Native American people who lived in the Four Corners region of the United States, where Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. They were skilled builders, creating these impressive homes that were carved into the sides of cliffs. These dwellings were kind of like the skyscrapers of their time. They towered over everything else in the region until the 1880s, when actual skyscrapers came into play. But for as advanced as they were, things did not end well. The theory is that they were dealing with a long-term drought, and deforestation was happening too. They were using up a lot of wood, probably for building and cooking. Add water management issues to the mix, and it's easy to see why things started to fall apart. Tensions rose due to desperation, and that's what likely led to violent conflicts. And by around 1300 AD, the Anasazi had mostly dispersed. Next on the list, we have the Rapa Nui civilization on Easter Island. This is the island with all those amazing stone statues known as moai. The fact that they were able to carve these things out of volcanoes and then transport the 14-ton behemoths around the island is a pretty incredible feat. For a long time, it was a complete mystery as to how they actually did it, but it turns out they would have used a system of ropes with a team pulling the statues back and forth, making the moai kind of like walk. It's pretty cool. So what went wrong with the Rapa Nui? Well, scientists dug into the dirt, looking at ancient charcoal pieces and pollen in the soil, found that the Rapa Nui had chopped down almost every tree on the island. Then rats on the island were eating the tree seeds before new trees could grow, so the forest was completely wiped out. Without trees, the people lost their ability to make rope and canoes, and apparently they started burning grass to make fire. This was all pretty bad, and you can bet tensions were high, and things would have gotten even worse when Europeans showed up in 1722. The first Europeans to set foot on Easter Island, they did their thing. They didn't come in peace. It's about as classic as it gets, unfortunately. And if that wasn't enough, by the 1870s, waves of smallpox and a major Peruvian slave raid hit the Rapa Nui, and these were the last nails in the coffin for the already small population on the island. Next up are the Mississippians. The Mississippians were a group of Native American societies that thrived in the southeastern United States from around 800 to 1600 AD. They were known for building these complex societies with impressive mounds, and Cahokia was one of their biggest and most impressive cities. This place, located near present-day St. Louis, Missouri, was the largest pre-Columbian settlement north of Mexico. At its peak, it had a population of around 20,000 people, possibly even double that. It had enormous earthen mounds, including the famous Monk's Mound, which is still one of the largest man-made earthen mounds in North America, but it eventually fell. Around the late 13th century, the population began to dwindle, and by the 14th century, the city was largely abandoned. Nature slowly reclaimed the area. It's not very clear what led to the decline. There aren't explicit records from that time, but it was probably a combination of things, environmental and economic. Next on the list are the people of the Nabta Playa. So Nabta Playa is a dry lake bed located in the Nubian desert of southern Egypt. It has these archaeological remains dating back to around 10,000 to 6,000 years ago during the Neolithic period. The people who once lived here left behind evidence of their advanced understanding of astronomy and agriculture. They erected a stone circle kind of similar to the Stonehenge in England, which seems to be what they used to map the stars. Some archaeologists think these stone formations worked as an ancient kind of calendar, but other than the stone circles they left behind, we really don't know a whole lot about the people of Nabta Playa. Archaeologists and historians are still trying to piece together their daily lives, social structures, and what ultimately happened to them. The site seems to have been abandoned around 5,000 years ago, but the lack of written records from that time period, it makes it tough to pinpoint the exact reasons behind their disappearance. Next up we have Çatalhöyük. Çatalhöyük in central Turkey is not only one of the first known urban settlements in the world, but also one of the strangest. So instead of streets like you have with most cities, I mean every city, here all the homes and buildings were connected, and to get around people walked along the paths on roofs and then descended down into their homes with ladders. Looking at images of the place, it looks almost like a big ginormous honeycomb type of formation. It's very unique. There aren't really any places like it. There were also no cemeteries. Residents buried their dead underneath their own homes. The fate of its inhabitants is still mysterious, which isn't surprising considering how ancient it is, but around 6700 BCE, the site was abandoned, and researchers are still piecing together the reasons behind it. The ancient city of Thonis, which now sits at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. I love ancient underwater cities. There's just something so beautiful but eerie about them at the same time. So Thonis was an Egyptian city located near the mouth of the Nile River. It was one of the most important port cities in ancient Egypt, a thriving port city during the time of the pharaohs, a center for trade with Greece and other Mediterranean countries, and it played a big role in the Egyptian economy. The city had these grand temples and statues dedicated to the various gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt, but then it sank. There were probably natural disasters like earthquakes, and of course the sea levels rose, and for centuries this place was lost and forgotten until underwater archaeologists discovered its ruins in 2000, with divers finding well-preserved artifacts like statues, pottery, and religious objects. Alright, we gotta talk about it. The lost city of Atlantis. Atlantis was a legendary city, first mentioned by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. And according to Plato, Atlantis was this powerful and advanced civilization that existed around 9,000 years before his own time. So that's about 11,000 years ago from today. But it's still a complete mystery as to whether or not this place really did exist. A lot of uppity scientists say it didn't, but they also sound very not fun. It's said that Atlantis had a sophisticated government, advanced technology, and a prosperous economy. The Atlanteans were described as this powerful, warlike people who eventually became corrupt and decadent, leading the gods to punish them by submerging their island beneath the sea in a single day and night. The exact location of Atlantis is still unknown, and there are a lot of archaeologists that figure Atlantis, the whole story behind it, was really just a legend and an allegory rather than an actual place. Some of the rumored locations, though, range from the Mediterranean to Antarctica, but there's never been any definitive physical evidence of its existence. And finally, of course, we have the Maya, who created some of the most incredible architecture and artwork of any known ancient civilization. And not only were their cities and artwork spectacular, but their knowledge about astronomy was unparalleled for the time. But around the 9th and 10th centuries, their cities, which once bustled with life, started to empty out, and that's always been a mystery as to why. It's hard to pinpoint an exact cause because parts of the civilization fell at various times. It was a wide-stretching civilization with various languages and practices across the board, but there are some ideas as to what happened. Environmental stress is usually a big factor. Could have been droughts or crop failures. Another thing could be overpopulation. Resources could have started running thin, and when there's overpopulation, there's more violence. Not a great recipe for a peaceful society. There might have been some political problems as well, with rulers losing control, causing internal conflicts.
Starting off our list today with the peoples of Nan Madol, who lived approximately 1,200 years ago in the ancient city Nan Madol off Pohnpei, Micronesia, located in the western Pacific, about 2,500 miles southwest of Hawaii. The civilization lived on the east side of the island, but the materials used to build their civilization were only ever available on the west side. And so the people of Nan Madol must have journeyed from one side of the island to the other in order to retrieve the 750,000 tons of heavy basalt they used to construct their intricate structures. By the way, the average modern-day cruise ship only weighs about 250,000 tons, so these materials would have been about triple that. And not only did they have to move these materials, they had to carve and shape and stack them too. I mean, clearly they did a great job, seeing as many of their structures still stand today, but it was also done without any concrete or mortar whatsoever. It's literally just the weight of the stones that have held ritual sites, temples, and tombs together to this day. It is an amazing achievement, but historians truly have no idea how the civilization could have possibly done what they did without the assistance of modern-day technology. It's a true historic mystery.
When it comes to mysterious ancient Mesoamerican civilizations, the Mayans are usually the first to come to mind, but probably even more mysterious are the Olmecs. You look up Olmecs on Google Images and you'll see tons of pictures of their beautifully crafted sculptures, but not a whole lot is really known about their culture or why they disappeared. They were one of the earliest civilizations in the Americas, living in what is now southern Mexico, around 1200 to 400 BCE. From what has been left behind, they were a pretty advanced civilization, but even still, so much about them has been lost to time. They're probably most well known for their colossal stone heads, massive sculptures, some weighing as much as 40 tons, often depicting human faces. The fact that the Olmecs transported and carved them without the type of technology we had today is pretty impressive. They may have also developed one of the earliest known writing systems in the Americas, but only a few inscriptions have ever been found, and they're hard to decipher. They seem to influence later cultures though. Their art style, some of their religious symbols, they appear in other Mesoamerican societies that came long after the Olmecs had vanished, so maybe they just dispersed and formed into other societies.
Next up, we have the peoples of Göbekli Tepe, an 11,000-year-old ancient civilization in southeastern Turkey found in 1994 that is believed to have built the world's very first temple, and archaeologists and historians have absolutely no idea how they could have done it. Only 5% of the site has been excavated to date, but so far the ruins of 20 circles of rock pillars, which with each pillar weighing up to 50 tons and most measuring in at almost 16 feet high, engraved with animal carvings and human forms, were located at the site of Göbekli Tepe, with no clues as to how the massive formations could have possibly been erected in the prehistoric world. The structures created at Göbekli Tepe are comparable with the achievements of the Great Pyramids, which came roughly 7,000 years after the first temple was built. While scientists studying the site have absolutely no idea how it came to be, they have theorized that it was used for either ancient rituals or as an ancient observatory. Basically, they have no idea what's going on here. They're stumped and they're confused. What was it? Baffled, bobbled, discum, bobbled. They don't understand.
I love the idea of lost ancient civilizations, ones that may or may not have actually existed. Makes you wonder if there's this lost period of time similar to what Robert E. Howard depicted in his Conan stories. One supposedly lost civilization you don't hear about often, though, is the lost continent of Mu. So according to the story, Mu was a large landmass somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, home to an advanced civilization. The continent is said to have sank beneath the waves thousands of years ago. So, a lot like Atlantis. Mu is often said to be pretty much the same as Lemuria as well. The idea of Mu became popular in the late 19th and early 20th centuries thanks to writers like James Churchward. Churchward claimed to have discovered these ancient tablets in India that told the story of Mu. He described it as a highly developed society with sophisticated knowledge of science and technology, but there's said to be no verifiable evidence of Mu or Lemuria. The idea that an entire continent would just sink like that in such a short amount of time is just not really how it works. The land may break apart and drift over time, but it wouldn't just vanish without a trace. Still though, there could be a grain of truth behind the legend and others like it. Stories of Mu might be based on real events that have just been misinterpreted over time or embellished. Could be referring to smaller islands that were submerged, for example.
Next up, we have the Kofun tombs, 16,000 ancient tombs, the largest of which is over 1,000 feet wide and 1,600 feet long, which is twice as long as the largest tomb in the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Kofun tombs are located in Japan. They are tightly sealed, and for some reason, they also look like a giant keyhole. Historians assume that the Kofun tombs were built for the 16th emperor of Japan, Emperor Nintoku, who supposedly died in 399 AD at the age of 109. But since they have yet to excavate the sacred site, there is really no way to know for sure. Right now, it's really just one big mystery, and it's looking like it might stay that way, unfortunately, or fortunately, because the grounds are classified as a sacred religious area. Trying to enter them is illegal, and trying to dig them up would surely land you at least 1 or 2 years behind bars. I think we should maybe just let this one rest and remain a mystery. Sometimes it's nice to wonder.
Çatalhöyük is a Neolithic settlement in Turkey that dates back around 7500 BC. It was rediscovered in the late 50s by James Mallard, who found these layers of buildings. Excavations showed that the settlement consisted of tightly packed mud brick houses, and there were no streets. So how did the people get around? Well, they moved around on the rooftops. Suffice to say, the architecture is fascinating and incredibly unique. Houses were accessed through holes in the ceiling, and there were no clear public buildings. They also found a ton of artifacts, from everyday tools to murals depicting hunting scenes and even human figures. People also buried their dead underneath their homes, and I briefly mentioned this before, but another really cool thing about this society was that there were no grand buildings or signs of a ruling class at all. It seems like social status was relatively equal among everyone. The people at Çatalhöyük were also into agriculture, growing grains like wheat and barley, while also hunting and gathering. The Olmecs were one of the earliest and most influential civilizations in Mesoamerica. They started to form around 1400 to 1200 BCE, but more recent discoveries may push them back even further, to about 16 to 15 BCE, thanks to findings at a site called El Manati. The Olmecs are believed to have evolved from early farming cultures in the Tabasco region dating back as far as 5100 BCE. Their first major center was San Lorenzo. Tenochtitlan, the region's fertile land, and the Coatzacoalcos River helped support a pretty sizable population, leading to the rise of an elite class that demanded fancier goods. And the elites traded for materials like jade and obsidian found in far-off places, which means they had a trade network across Mesoamerica. As time went on, San Lorenzo eventually fell apart around 900 BCE. La Venta then took the spotlight. From 900 BCE until about 400 BCE, La Venta was home to the Great Pyramid, the Mesoamerican version, of course, the largest structure in Mesoamerica at the time, which still stands today. The Olmec civilization is most famous for their massive stone heads, believed to be portraits of their rulers. Each head is unique and is adorned with distinctive headdresses. The Khmer Empire was a powerful civilization in Southeast Asia that lasted from 802 CE to 1431, thereabouts. It stretched across present-day Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and parts of Vietnam. This empire was this blend of Buddhist and Hindu cultures, which came about after centuries of conflict. The Khmer are also best known for their incredible architecture, particularly the temples of Angkor, which are still some of the most impressive monuments in the world. And a lot of these structures are, thankfully, still in remarkably good condition to this day. But like a lot of great civilizations, the Khmer Empire eventually began to decline. As for why? Well, one possibility is that the migration of Thai people slowly encroached on Khmer territory, similar to how Germanic tribes moved into the Roman Empire. This gradual takeover may have weakened the Khmer's political influence over time. Others think that constant warfare is what did them in. Another theory is that there could have been changes in the climate that messed with their agriculture. If rainfall patterns changed, the Khmer might have struggled to maintain their farms, and mass amounts of people would have had to leave. The Nabta Playa people lived in southern Egypt around 6 to 11,000 years ago. They were primarily nomadic, moving around in search of food and water. Eventually, some members began to settle in the area, forming a more permanent civilization. As the climate started drying out, the region transformed into a desert, which would have sucked for them, but it did help preserve a lot of the artifacts that they left behind. One of the most famous things they left behind is the stone circle of Nabta Playa, which is the oldest known astronomical site on Earth. But along with marking the seasons, archaeologists have discovered animal remains in underground chambers, meaning that rituals may have taken place here as well. Like the other ancient civilizations on this list, the Nabta Playa people eventually disappeared. Climate change played a major role in their decline, pushing them to migrate and adapt elsewhere. And finally, the Minoan civilization lived on the Greek island of Crete from around 3000 to 1000 BC. They were a distinct culture recognized as the early ancestors of later ancient Greek society. The Minoans had pretty interesting religious lives, which included animal sacrifices, big festivals, and a number of cults celebrating nature and fertility. Egyptian hieroglyphs reference the Minoans, and from this we can determine they were active traders. They were also skilled in arts, coming up with beautiful pottery and intricate frescoes, but their civilization fell away, and one theory is that it was thanks to a volcanic eruption in the nearby Santorini Islands, which could have unleashed all these devastating tsunamis and ash clouds. Another theory comes from the Greek historian Herodotus, who thought that plagues and diseases might have been the cause. But like most of the ancient civilizations on this list, we don't know exactly how they disappeared.